Borthakur IAS Academy, an endeavor of excellence.
Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to Borthakur IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. I hope you all are doing well, and today I'm here with another segment of Current Affairs 365 dated 10th of July 2021. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. So the first news of today is related to international relations. It is about the rail services agreement between India and Nepal. A letter of exchange has been signed between India and Nepal to the India-Nepal Rail Services Agreement of 2004. And this will allow all authorized cargo train operators to utilize the Indian Railway network to carry Nepal's container and other freight. This is going to be both bilateral between India and Nepal, or any third country from the Indian ports to Nepal. Now let us have a look at the key points of this Rail Services Agreement of 2004. This agreement was executed in 2004 between the Ministry of Railways Government of India and the Ministry of Commerce Government of Nepal. This was done for introduction of freight train services between the two countries to and from Birganj, Nepal via Raxaul, India. This agreement guides movement between India and Nepal by rail, and this agreement, it shall be reviewed every 5 years and may be modified as per the letter of exchanges, through this letter of exchanges by contracting parties having mutual consent. In the past, there have been amendments to this RSA through letter of exchange on 3 occasions. First amendment was in 2004, followed by the second letter of exchange, which was signed in 2008 at the time of introduction of bilateral cargo. Then third letter of exchange was signed in 2016, which enabled rail transit traffic to and from Visakhapatnam port. The benefits of the latest agreement includes allowing market forces to operate. This liberalization will allow market forces to come up in the rail freight segment in Nepal, and it is also likely to increase efficiency and cost competitiveness, eventually benefiting the Nepalese consumer. Then it is going to reduce the transportation cost. The liberalization will particularly reduce transportation cost for automobiles and certain other products whose carriage takes place in special wagons, and will boost the rail cargo movement between the two countries. Then lastly, it is going to enhance the regional connectivity. The signing of this LOE, it marks another milestone in India's efforts to enhance regional connectivity under Neighbourhood First policy. Now, what is this Neighbourhood First policy? It is a part of India's foreign policy that actively focuses on improving our ties with our immediate neighbors, which is being termed as Neighbourhood First policy in the media. It was started by inviting all heads of the states and governments of South Asian countries in the inauguration of PM Modi's first term, and later it held bilateral talks with all of them individually, which was dubbed as a mini SAARC summit. Also, in the second swearing-in ceremony in 2019, India had invited the heads of the BIMSTEC countries. If we see at the Indo-Nepal relations, then Nepal is an important neighbor of our country, which occupies special significance in its foreign policy because of its geographic, historical, cultural linkages that spans centuries. The India-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1950, it forms the bedrock of the special relations that exists between the two countries. Moreover, India and Nepal, they share similar ties in terms of Hinduism and Buddhism, which with Buddha's birthplace Lumbini located in present-day Nepal. Moreover, the two countries, they share an open border and unhindered movement of people. They also have close bonds through marriage and familial ties. It is popularly known as Roti Beti Ka Rishta. Then there are many common multilateral forums where India and Nepal share partnerships. Okay, it includes the BBIN, that is Bangladesh, Bhutan, India and Nepal. BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. Non-Aligned Movement, SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, etc. However, there are also certain issues between the two countries. In 2017, Nepal signed up the China's BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, which sought to create highways, airports and other infrastructure in the country. BRI was rejected by India, and this move of Nepal was seen as an inclination towards China. Currently, India and Nepal have border disputes over Kalapani, then the Limpiadhura and Lipulekh tri-junction between India and Nepal, and China and the Sasta area of West Champaran district of Bihar. Secondly, we will be discussing about the joint communication for tribal communities. A joint communication was recently signed by two ministries, Ministry of Tribal Affairs and the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. This is mainly aimed at providing more power to the tribal communities for managing their forest resources. Forests, they are not just home to trees and animals, but they are also a vital source of clean air, timber, wood, fruits, fodder and much more. And these are known as forest resources upon which many lives are dependent for survival as well as livelihood. Since it provides such a variety of items, okay, thus this is the main reason why forests are exploited at a very high rate, and it also makes its conservation and protection furthermore important. There are many initiatives for forest conservation and preservation. It includes Indian Forest Act of 1927, Forest Conservation Act of 1980, then we have the National Mission for Green India, Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, etc. Now let us have a look at the key points of this joint communication. This joint communication pertains to more effective implementation of the Forest Rights Act of 2006. Along with that, it also makes sure that the livelihood, modes of livelihood is improved for the forest dwelling scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers. Here we will also discuss about the Forest Rights Act of 2006 in the later part of this slide. Now the state forest departments, they are to undertake certain projects for value chain addition that will include capacity building of primary collectors, new harvesting methods, and also storage, processing and marketing of the non-timber forest products. Now the tribal and other forest dwellers, they can contribute significantly in efforts towards climate change through preservation of biodiversity, environmental conservation, and by enhancing the forest cover. These forest dwellers, they are dependent on forests not just for their livelihood but also because their traditions are intertwined with the forests. Now what is non-timber forest product? The non-timber forest product or the minor forest produce, it includes all non-timber forest produce of plant origin, which can be bamboo, canes, then leaves, gums, wax, dyes, etc. It also provides subsistence and cash income for people who can live in or near the forests. They also form a major portion of their food, then fruits, medicines and other consumption items, which provides cash income through sales. And the non-timber forest produce, they are also known as MFP or minor forest produce or non-wood forest produce, NWFP. There are also some initiatives for the forest dwellers. Okay, government has enacted the Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Act of 2006, which is commonly known as this Forest Rights Act, and it recognized the right to livelihood and occupation within the forest of these communities. Along with that, we also have the Eklavya Model Residential Schools, Pradhan Mantri Van Dhan Yojana, Program for Capacity Building of Scheduled Tribe Representatives in Local Self-Governments, etc. So now, as I said that we will be discussing the Forest Rights of 2006. This act, it recognizes the forest rights in the land for forest dwelling scheduled tribes and other traditional forest dwellers. These people, they have been residing in such areas for generations. And the forest rights, they can be claimed by any member or community who has lived there, for whose 3 generations have lived there in those areas prior to 13th of December 2005. And this act, it strengthens the conservation regime of forests while it ensures livelihood and forest security of these dwellers. The Gram Sabha, it is the authority that will initiate the process for determining the nature and extent of the individual forest rights. The act, it identifies 4 types of rights. First is title right. Then we have the use rights, the rights of the dwellers that extends to extracting the minor forest produce. Okay. Then the third one is relief and development rights, and lastly the forest management rights. The forest management rights, it includes the right to protect, regenerate or conserve any community forest resource which they have been traditionally protecting and conserving for their sustainable usage. And now the third news, it is about the world's first database of genomic variations in oral cancer, DB-GenPoC. The National Institute of Biomedical Genomics, which is funded by Department of Biotechnology, they have created this database, which is the first of its kind. And this is a comprehensive flexible database framework which has been developed with an aim to allow the potential users access, query, browse and download the clinically relevant somatic and germline variation data for Indian oral cancer patients. Somatic or the acquired genomic variants, these are the most common cause of cancer which occurs from damage to the genes in an individual cell during the person's lifetime. And a germline variant, it occurs in the gametes and it is passed directly from a parent to a child at the time of conception. And the cancers which are caused by germline pathogenic variants, these are generally inherited. And this particular database, it is going to be updated annually with variation data from new oral cancer patients from different parts of our country as well as Southeast Asia. Now, coming to the current cancer burden of our country, as per the World Cancer Report of 2020, India had an estimated 1.16 million new cases in 2018. And the 6 most common types includes breast cancer, oral cancer, cervical cancer, lung cancer, stomach cancer and the colorectal cancer. Oral cancer is most prevalent form of cancer in our country among men, which is mainly fueled by the tobacco chewing. Some relevant initiatives which are there includes the National Cancer Grid. It is a network of major cancer centers, research institutes, patient groups and charitable institutions all across the country with a mandate of establishing uniform standards of patient care for prevention, diagnosis and treatment of this disease. Then we also have the NGG, that stands for National Genomic Grid. It collects sample from the cancer patients through a network of Pan-India collection centers and it brings all cancer treatment institutes on board. There are some other institutes also, other initiatives also, which includes National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes, Cardiovascular Diseases and Stroke. It is being implemented by the National Health Mission for up to the district level activities. The next news is related to environment and biodiversity, and it is about the conflict between human and wildlife. Recently, a report has been released by the World Wildlife Fund for Nature along with the United Nations Environment Programme. This has been titled as A Future for All, a Need for Human-Wildlife Coexistence. This report, it examined the increasing cases of human-wildlife conflict. Human-wildlife conflict, it refers to the struggles that mainly arises because of presence of a wildlife species that poses actual or perceived direct recurring threats to human interest. The major causes of human-wildlife conflict is because of, lack of protected areas. Marine and terrestrial protected areas, they only cover 9.67% globally. And in India itself, 37% tigers, they currently lie outside the protected areas. The second reason can be wildlife-borne infections. A very prominent example here is COVID-19 pandemic itself. It was sparked by a zoonotic disease, right, which is driven by the close association of people, their livestock, etc. with the wildlife. And because of unregulated consumption of wildlife animals, these infections or these animal microbes, they are transferred at a quite higher rate. The rate of transferring these diseases has been increased in recent times. Other reasons are like urbanization. Okay, in modern times, rapid urbanization and industrialization, it has led to the diversion of forest lands to non-forest areas, and this has resulted in shrinking of the wildlife habitat. Along with that, the increasing human population, many human settlements, they come up near the peripheries of protected areas, and it causes encroachment in the forest lands by the local people. Next, the impacts of such conflicts. First is that human-wildlife conflict, they can have a detrimental and permanent impact on ecosystems and biodiversity. People, they might kill animals in self-defense, and it can drive the species involved in conflict to extinction. Then it also has a negative impact on local communities. The most evident and direct negative impact here is that people from wildlife includes injuries and loss of lives, livestock, crops and other properties. Then it also has an impact on equity as well as on social dynamics. So the probable solutions includes moving from conflict to coexistence. The main goal of conflict management should be to enhance the safety of both people and wildlife, and this will create mutual benefits of coexistence. Then we must have an integrative and holistic approach, okay, which will allow the species to survive in areas where they otherwise would have declined or become extinct. And all species on our planet, they are essential for maintaining the ecosystem health and functions. Lastly, participation. Full participation of the local communities, it can help reduce the conflicts and lead to coexistence between humans as well as wildlife. Now coming to the Indian scenario, India faces an increasing challenge of human-wildlife conflict, and it is mainly driven by several factors like development pressures, then increasing population, high demand for land and natural resources. This results in loss, fragmentation and degradation of wildlife habitats. And in India, some data, it shows that over 500 elephants were killed between 2014 to 15 and 18 to 19, which are mostly related to human-elephant conflict. Some initiatives that has been taken in order to manage these conflicts includes advisory for management of conflict. This has been issued by the Standing Committee of National Board of Wildlife. Then state-specific initiatives includes the Uttarakhand government carrying out biofencing by growing various species of plants in that area. Then the Supreme Court affirmed the right of passage for the elephants and the closure of resorts in the Nilgiri Elephant Corridor. And this was all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it will be helpful. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you all again tomorrow with another segment of Current Affairs 365 only on Borthakur IAS Academy. Till then, take care, keep learning. Bye-bye.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS Academy